All right, of course, we are monitoring developments for you in terms of the first cabinet lekgotla that is expected to be taking place today. We've shown you live visuals earlier on, of course, about that particular briefing that is expected to be happening now, any moment now, by the Minister in the Presidency, Minister Ntshavheni. Of course, our international news editor is also monitoring those developments with me in studio, Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, of course, this is an important lekgotla that we are expecting this afternoon. One of the things, of course, that will be discussed, as we've been reporting, is that issue in the DRC on the ground at the moment. We know that we've been hearing reports, of course, that Angie Motshekga, the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, is expected to brief cabinet ministers today. What can you tell us about what we know so far?
We know that the M23 rebels has actually captured most of Goma, and they have also captured the airport. And you know that that airport is being used particularly as a place to have all the artilleries that are being sent in for MONUSCO, that is the UN mission. But also it is a very critical airport in terms of evacuation. The other issue that we saw many people being paraded by the Rwandan government at the border, and these looks like mercenaries, and that's what the Rwandan government is saying, the European mercenaries, because most of them are from Europe, and they are saying they are from Romania, who were helping the government of the DRC to fight with the M23 rebels. And therefore, you can see that this speaks to the control on the ground by the M23 rebels. In relation to the South African troops at this moment, they are at their base. Much as perhaps they are surrounded by M23 in terms of M23 now in control of majority of Goma. But they are currently safe because there has been negotiations behind the scenes to ensure that there's no fighting again, where we might see a situation where the troops might have to defend themselves to repel the M23 rebels. And now governments, that is the government of South Africa and all stakeholders, including the UN, the Rwandan government, the DRC, the leaders in the region, East Africa region, they are trying to negotiate a passage so that you can repatriate the bodies of those soldiers who have perished, and also to find a solution where to from now. We know that the president of Kenya did invite both President Tshisekedi and President Paul Kagame this morning. It was a virtual meeting, but we are told that President Tshisekedi didn't participate. Now everybody is hoping that tomorrow during the SADC meeting, these two leaders will participate, whether in person or virtually, because that meeting must really come up with an interim ceasefire agreement. We know that Luanda talks are being led by Angolan president. He will be there. Perhaps in the SADC region, they can push for that cessation of hostilities and ceasefire through Luanda talks. We know that South Africa will be represented by the president in Zimbabwe because the country has suffered huge loss. We know that the Minister of International Relations and the minister in the presidency, as we have pointed out, they are about to brief the media around this main issue of DRC, but also other issues, international issues, such as the current debate around the continuation of PEPFAR or not, as per the executive summary signed by President Donald Trump stopping the aid to African countries and other countries around the world. The issue of ArcelorMittal, as you know, that job losses there will be immense. But I think the main issue that is going to grab their attention, it will be when they talk about the situation in the DRC. Other information we get is that, as you know, that there were embassies that were attacked yesterday. Those countries whose embassies were attacked have decided to stop flights to Kinshasa as a part of demonstrating their displeasure because the government of the DRC was supposed to protect the embassies. Embassies are foreign land. When you touch an embassy, you touch a country. That is why even in South Africa, when you saw those protests in support of Gaza or the Palestinians, at no point those march or different protests that were going to the embassy of Israel, there were attacks at the embassy of Israel. It was just peaceful march, whether it be a consul general of the United States of America, because South Africans understand too well that an embassy is a foreign land. You can't just attack it. But unfortunately, there was that violation of international law yesterday in the DRC where the embassies were attacked. And therefore, this is what's happening on the ground. And I think the president is in constant communication with all the stakeholders in the Great Lakes region, in East Africa, in the SADC region, to see how this matter can be resolved, where you can achieve a pause so that you can deal with those who are injured and those who have perished.
Sophie, you've touched on a number of issues. Before that briefing begins, I just want to ask you this question. Of course, we'll come back to South Africa's role here. But in fact, talking about South Africa, the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, releasing a statement, a lengthy one today, just talking about South Africa's role in trying to keep, of course, the peace in that region. But what leverage does the DRC government have in resolving the conflict diplomatically? We know, of course, that the DRC in fact, through its president, President Tshisekedi, has approached the UN Security Council on this particular matter. But what avenues, as we talk about de-escalating the violence, does the DRC have in this case?
I think tomorrow the DRC will have to be honest in terms of how they meet SADC halfway, in terms of their demands, so that you can achieve this ceasefire and this pause. And then you can work out how you talk about this issue. But unfortunately, I can guarantee you now, President Felix Tshisekedi is going to refuse to engage M23 rebels. When he does that, you already have a problem there because they are going to then continue. The other issue is, it is going to be difficult now to ask the M23 that has made so much inroads now in the eastern part to retreat and go back to their bases because they've already taken the strategic places, including the airport. And therefore, this matter now, President Tshisekedi must understand it is now even more difficult. The second issue is the SADC leadership will have to engage Rwanda to help SADC to find a solution. And these are the issues that you can engage on. But the UN is paralyzed. The Security Council is paralyzed. They couldn't resolve Ukraine. They couldn't resolve Middle East. And we predicted that the paralysis of the Security Council that is supposed to maintain the world peace will lead to more trouble in the world because nobody now respects the Security Council. So that's the problem right now. So it is up to the regional players to help find a solution to this problem. But also, all sides must be willing to compromise.
And of course, we can't not be talking about this and forgetting, of course, how heavily criticized, domestically at least, South Africa has been in just handling of this particular crisis. 13 SANDF soldiers have since died. We know that the repatriation process is currently underway. As we look at the first cabinet lekgotla that is taking place today, we know that, of course, the Defense and Military Veterans Minister, Angie Motshekga, will be updating cabinet about this particular situation. What is she likely to say, particularly as we talk about the military readiness and the capabilities of the SANDF?
I think she's going to be honest behind the scenes, what transpired, what are the challenges, and whether we can boldly say we will be able to handle the situation on the ground. She is going to indicate what needs to be done to ensure that you have this ceasefire so that you can deal with those South Africans who have perished, bring them home. She is going to indicate what processes are unfolding to engage families and prepare for funerals, but also what needs to be done to resolve this issue. Of course, the Commander-in-Chief, I expect President Ramaphosa, after cabinet meeting, that's likely to end on Friday, and after going to the SADC meeting, to take the nation into confidence in terms of what happened, why, where to from here, and also for the families, because it is important for South Africa to understand the nature of this big, massive international story that is unfolding and where South Africa suffered losses. And therefore, I think we will see the president speaking to this. I can't guarantee when, but I think particularly after the SADC meeting, where he can come with concrete facts in terms of what is going to happen, because he would have gotten a buying in of all stakeholders in that region. Remember, South Africa is caught in a crossfire here because of the involvement there. This matter is a matter for DRC in particular, of course, the neighboring countries that are being accused of ensuring that you continuously have this problem. And therefore, it is an important moment for government to speak to South Africa, to speak to the families, so that it can't be just rumors, fake news, misinformation, particularly now with the digital platform. Anybody can post anything, and that can lead to misinformation and also fake news. You have to be on your toes to ensure that the nation gets the correct facts on the ground, but also for the sake of the families.
We've talked about, of course, just the regional reaction as well as the continental reaction, SADC, even the East African community leaders in the form of Kenyan President William Ruto hosting that particular summit. But what has, in the main, the international community's interest here been, particularly when you look at East, DRC and Goma in particular, that is now being captured by the M23 rebels? What can you tell us there in terms of the significance of international community also reacting to this particular matter?
This problem, you can locate it to colonial time, when those boundaries were set up, where people didn't even think what the implication can be in future. Because sometimes you create these boundaries, and these people, now you have nationalities who are sharing the same group of people, and you then have a problem for acceptance in those respective countries. Secondly, the interest in terms of when the scramble of Africa started in those years, where the intention was to just get the minerals of the continent. You didn't care about these Africans, even using these Africans to fight amongst themselves, because you are able to get these mineral resources without paying taxes, with illicit outflows. The other issue is these countries themselves, when they were liberated, instead of them saying we are Africans, how do we build our continent? Some of them think they owe allegiance to their former colonizers. When they have problems, they still rely on their former colonizers. Their former colonizers speak for them. And that is the problem. So this notion of African problems resolved by Africans, sometimes it doesn't come to play. And lastly, it's the internal problem of the DRC. How do you ensure that you bring together all the people of the DRC, anyone who's in the territory of the DRC, to feel that I am a Congolese? And the issue that led to that, when they were demobilizing the 200 militia groups in the DRC after the Sun City Agreement, some of them, they were not incorporated into the army of the DRC. When you attain freedom and you have military wings of different organizations, if you don't bring them in the fold, as you build a new nation, a country, they will mobilize. That is why even South Africa at some point in time, it was grappling with the integration process of the defense force, because you have to do that. I think those are some of the issues that are very, very critical in terms of the problem of the DRC. And of course, then you have neighbors who have vested interest in different ways, form or shape.
Let's talk now about the humanitarian angle to this particular violence. We know, of course, that in Goma alone, hundreds of thousands of residents had to flee and leave their homes, joining millions of others who have been displaced in the DRC. How has this impacted just on human life, particularly in this case, women and children? We know that there's an international conference of women that is taking place in this country, of women from across the continent who've also raised their concerns about what is happening in conflict regions in the country.
For a long time, women and children in the DRC have suffered, maimed, raped, and always on the run. You see them. It is a sad story for Africa and an indictment on the leadership of the continent. This latest development is going to aggravate the situation. You can see them in those pictures. They are so used to, moving from one area to another. And therefore, I think the time has come for Africans themselves to understand that now they have to build their own continent. And when there are challenges, they must address these challenges in an honest way, and they must bring to the table women to speak for themselves. And the sad thing, you will see tomorrow, that SADC meeting, very few women will be in the room. It will be just men. And therefore, when these discussions take place, women and children take a back seat. And that is why they will continue to suffer the way they are suffering. I think the time has come for women on the continent to also say, enough is enough. When these negotiations are happening, we must be on the table. Fortunately, the chair of the Troika organ on politics and defense is the president of Tanzania, and she is a woman. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say it, she has been found wanting. We haven't even seen a statement from President Sulu Hassan as the chair of the organ on Troika politics and defense, because she has her own interest in terms of the elections coming in Tanzania. Now she is inward looking. She has got an energy summit, but no word on what's happening in the DRC. So maybe tomorrow with the chair, Zimbabwe, Emerson Mnangagwa, who's the chair of the assembly, we might see some serious movement in ensuring that there is some cessation of hostilities.
Yeah, as we wrap our conversation, Sophie, and I know we've touched a little bit on the potential resolutions and the way forward to this particular matter, but we've also talked about, diplomatic approach that could be taken here. We know, of course, South Africa is heavily involved also in that front. Is there a viable military solution, or are we saying here that a negotiated settlement is the only way forward?
The negotiated settlement will be lasting solution. Military, it's not going to be a lasting solution. It's an intervention. And therefore, I think you have to say, let's all demobilize, let's engage in the negotiations, clarify what's happening, the cause, and where to from here. And therefore, the political intervention is very, very important. But all sides must be committed to peace. You don't want people on the table who are pretending that they want a permanent solution, whereas they just want a pause so that they can regroup and mobilize.
Sophie, thank you so much for that. Of course, Sophie Mokoena is our international news editor right here at the SABC.